Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. And welcome to the Infinite Way, where spirituality meets humanity. And I'd like to introduce you to part 6 of LaserEduLogics, presented by Carlos Concepcion, where you liberate your mind and body with liberal arts, yoga, and the Kabbalah. Welcome, Carlos.
Good day. Good to be here. Happy to be here again.
Yes, and we're so excited for you to be here because we talked about the VRD, or virtual retinal display, in our last episode, and cognitive understanding and learning in that respect. And there's so much more that I'd like to dig a little bit deeper into. So let's start here. When we talk about the transfiguration of computational trivium into photonic holographic trivium and the role that biophotonic logics plays in the laser information age, you commented within your book a little bit about the German scientist Dr. Fritz Popps as a photonics quantum logician, recreating and transfiguring the computational trivium of resonance with our inner biophotonics body and how it unlocks our physical, etheric, and astral and spiritual bodies.
Mm-hmm.
So, would you give us a little bit more background as to what that means in the cognitive sense, where we take that as our learning?
Wonderful question, as always. Very insightful, very penetrating. And it's deep, it goes back to the constitution of man as it is studied in the tradition, right? In the initiatic tradition. Yes, we're utilizing the modern contemporary resources, all of our advanced technological understandings, like we had previously spoken, that Dr. de la Ferriere and Raymond Abellio, they exploited all the advanced knowledge systems, the advanced knowledge base using the liberal arts. And that's it. And I'm just continuing with that approach. And so everything that we're presenting, of course, has that continuum with the tradition. So when we talk about a biophotonic body, right, or the body of light, in the tradition, we talk about a diamond body, the Trikaya, they call it in Tibetan yoga, the three bodies, right? The physical, the astral, and the spiritual body, but it's all connected. And so we started studying the biblical light, and then we saw how once you convert the words into numbers, now you see how that word acts in the universe and how that word acts within our constitution. And so we talked about the body, the soul, and the spirit, right? The body, the physical body, the astral body, and the spiritual consciousness that it incarnates in these bodies. So the light source, so we have this physical constitution, right? Biology, structural physiology, anatomy, and we have nervous system, circulatory systems. We have all these systems, right? Endocrine system. Well, then there is in cosmobiology, which is part of the Quadrivium studies, right? We study the cosmic constitution that is connected to that physical body. It's called the astral body. The astral body is called astral because it comes from the stars. It's connected to the stars. I think it was one of the great scientists said that we are star stuff. We're literally, biologically, chemically the same chemicals in our body, the same chemicals in the sun and the moon and Mercury and the stars and the planets and the stars. We're created of the same material. Now, what happens in the esoteric studies is that we study how these bodies are interconnected. So in science, in the objective sciences that we study, we see the anatomy and the physiology objectively, right, according to physics, according to chemistry. But in the esoteric studies, we see how the living connection there is to the star world, to the astral world. And this is what we call cosmobiology. Okay.
Mhm.
And the Kabbalah, like we had discussed, actually synthesizes all of it. There's a book, one of the two main books of the Kabbalah, the Sefer Yetzirah, talks about the book of formation. And then there's the HaZohar, which is the book of splendor, the book of light. And so in the Sefer Yetzirah, we study the objective constitution of the universe according to cosmobiology. That is the three mother letters, which are the architects, like the Shema, the schematics, the architect of the universe. And then there is the seven double letters, which is the seven planets, and the 12 letters are the source of the 12 constellations and the zodiac.
Okay.
Okay, so in our bodies, you know, the 12 constellations, they constitute the 12 regions of the body, from the feet, Pisces, Aquarius, with the ankles, the knees, is Capricorn, the thighs is Sagittarius, the sexual region is Scorpio, and then in Libra with the kidneys, a Virgo with the intestines. You have Leo with the heart and the back, Cancer with the stomach, and Gemini with the lungs and the arms, and you have Taurus in the neck, and you have Aries in the head. So that's one image of the cosmic constitution of man. All right. And then there is, of course, the seven glands, the pineal gland, the pituitary gland, the thyroid gland, the thymus gland, the pancreatic gland, the gonads, and then there is the prostate and the gonads, and the reproductive organ in the woman. So the seven planets are then connected to the glands. The planets are like condensers, right? They condense the 12 constellations. Now, we will have to go into the Quadrivium study to make a better description of the constitution, the cosmic constitution of man. So what the ancients did was they traced the constellation, which is an aggregation of stars, right? Agglomeration of stars. That's what each constellation is. But the Assyrians and the Babylonians, they went deeper and they traced geometrically, and at 360 degrees, they traced then what we call the ecliptic, which is the path that the sun and all the planets take around it. It's really the Earth's orbit around the sun.
Mm-hmm.
The Earth's orbit around the sun. Now, this orbit around of the Earth around the sun is called the ecliptic. It's the apparent path of all the planets, and that's what we call the zodiac, the tropical zodiac. Now, the tropical zodiac is different than the constellation of the zodiac constellations, because the constellations are not divided equally into 360 degrees, but the tropical zodiac is. And so, but it's a synthesis, it's a condenser of the 12 constellations. And the 12 then are condensed into the seven. That's what we call the chakras, seven chakras. Seven chakras are these magnetic wheels, right, that are planetary. They're in the astral world. That's why we don't see the chakras in the physical. The scientists cannot see it with the current instruments. They are advancing, with all these advanced photonic, visual technology. We will be able to see them. In fact, There's some technology called Curlian photography. They now
Yes.
photographing and this is where Dr. Fritz comes in now, photographing with a photo multiplier. He was able to zoom in sufficiently deep to uncover the biophotons. Now, the biophotons is this region, this quantum laser, biological laser inside the DNA and the information structure of the cells. Now, they're going deep enough. And of course, the more advanced the science becomes, the deeper we go into the quantum domain, the more we'll be able to see. Because this is an age of seeing, it's an age of light. So we'll be able to see this. All the structure that the ancients had already seen. Remember, they were seers. In yoga tradition, they have the Siddha yogis who had already mapped out the atomic structure. What Einstein uncovered mathematically and physically, thousands of years later, the Siddha yogis already had it laid out in the Vedas. You can see already the structure of the atom. And Democritus already in Greece already had laid out the idea of the atom. How do they do it? They didn't have microscopes. And so they were seers. They could see into the astral world. And this is something that we also develop in yoga with the CDs, we call the CDs. So we can start developing the psychic potential, the clairvoyance to actually see these bodies. So this is not something haphazard or invented or just speculation. Okay, this is actual anatomy and physiology of the astral body I'm talking about. And this is what Plato talked about, the soul of the world, the soul. See that? Yeah. And so that constitution that we talk about, the physical, is what objectively we can see. You know, I can see my body, and now, you know, they could trace, you know, they could trace the anatomical parts of it, the objective side. But then deeper now, we go into the astral constitution, and this is how the cosmobiologists or the traditional astrologers and esotericists, that's what they did. They mapped out. And the yogis, because it's the same. You know, the yogis also talk about the planetary and the pineal and the endocrine system connecting. And yoga is so advanced in this that they've already, even all the exercises in yoga, all the asanas are connected to the endocrine system.
Yes.
And the endocrine system is connected to the chakras, which are the magnetic wheels that harness, that connect us to the planetary energies. And so it's beautifully mapped out. And this is what the Kabbalah does as well, with the 3, the 7, and the 12.
Okay.
That the basis of the Sefer Yetzirah. That's how man or humanity was formed, by these cosmic forces. And, you know, they call them angels, you know, and now we call them quantum light. We call them different names, but the reality is still the same. You know, it's cosmic forces, right? Okay.
You know, I would love for you to comment on the quantum logic and its ultimate limits, homological to Abelio's absolute structure.
Low battery.
Right. The homologies, and this is a new it's a structural term. Abelio talks about homologies versus analogies.
Right.
Right. In occultism and the esoteric literature and the traditional literature, they talk a lot about analogies, analogia divina, which is the proportion that comes from the traditional studies. But it's more related to imaging. And with the homology, we go deeper into mathematical similarities, structural unity, as he calls it, unification of structure versus image, right? So you have the number and you have the image. And so the structure relates, the homology relates to the numerical identity. And so Abelio talks about these the homological structure. He calls what he calls the absolute structure,
Right.
which is derived from the Kabbalah, right? The absolute structure was that first word that we had discussed, the Barashis. The Barashit is Barashit. It's two words that were put together, and it's Bara means create, and six sheet in Hebrew is six directions of space. That created a sphere, center in the sixth direction, north, east, south, west, midheaven, and nadir, right? So you have a sphere, and in the center you have the seventh point, and that's where the seat of consciousness is. And so this is where Yahweh and Elohim center, and the center of the sphere, and then they go on to create, to form the universe as we see it. And that's why in mathematics you see most of the cosmologies are created within a sphere. It's spherical, right?
Yes.
Yeah, everything is documented. All the mathematics, everything is documented within this sphere. It's a spherical system. And so Abelio, he went in and so he started organizing, schematizing, as they say, these structures and the genetics of this mathematics. From the genetics are the algorithms that are derived, because everything is connected. And this is the difference, again, between Abelio's approach and the other Kabbalists and the symbolical traditionalists who fixate on symbols, on fixed symbols. But nothing is static in the universe. Everything is dynamic, right? And everything is connected and related. And this is where the genetics of these numbers is dynamic, and it corresponds better with the scientific approach versus the symbolical approach that we see in the normal in the esoteric literature. Right now, I know the question has to do with the connection that we did with the quantum light, right?
Yes.
And yeah, so I had started talking about the quantum entanglement theory, which is really the foundation for that inquiry. The quantum entanglement came from Einstein. Alan Aspect in 1989. He confirmed it, verified it experimentally, and then the scientists started harnessing this principle, right? And now we have Nobel Prize winners, expanding that theory, but they still don't understand the interior view of this.
Right.
The inner vision, right? The inner consciousness that makes that possible. And this was a big, what we call a big dispute. There was a big dispute in the break within the physics community between the quantum and the classical physicists. Because in the classical physicists, from Newton and Galileo all the way up to Einstein, they talk about a deterministic view, right?
Yes.
And that there was a principle of separation between the object and the subject. In other words, everything was objective, that it was impersonal, that we had nothing to do with these, with these laws, that they were objective, and that the subject had nothing to do. And this is why in the language of scientists, you see, they don't use the first person statement. They're always using this and that, and it's always an objective, and the I is absent. But now with quantum physics, what happened was that the observations became so deep to the level of the observer, it came up to the level of the consciousness, so that now you cannot separate. It violated that principle of separability between the object and the subject. And now there's a crisis. Science right now is in a philosophical crisis because they cannot explain why consciousness affects the observation. right? You cannot separate whenever you do an experiment, in quantum physics, they have to take into consideration the observer, because the subject is involved in the observation. It alters the observation, right? And so, and this is where consciousness comes in now. Consciousness has to be taken seriously into consideration in order to solve that crisis of inseparability of the connection between subject and object. And this is an advance. We're right in the middle of this revolution, this paradigm shift between the principle of separability and the principle of interdependence. Bella calls it the universal interdependence between subject and object, and all the knowledges there are now.
Yes. Now, this is a perfect segue, because when we talk about this, the first thing you want to go is, okay, all of this learning, where is the virtual world taking us? Where is it taking us? Where are we going with this? Okay, so you have laser cognition correction that's coming into play, and it enters into our daily lives. And so now, with it entering into our daily lives, how does this impact us? How does this really allow the learning to fruition? So one of the questions is where's the virtual world taking us? And then I also want to talk about Chomsky versus Hauser, with the different viewpoints that they have that suggests with universal grammar versus moral grammar. But before I do that, one of the things that I just thought about is that, does laser cognition correction that we use to enter our daily living, does this increase our percentage of our own brain usage also? Because you know how we only use a certain percentage of our brain, right? Oh, you only use 1/16 of your brain power. And so here it is, we're going to VRD. We're stimulating the aspects of our brain that have never been used before with this visual display and ability to take in this cognitive information. Are we using our brain power more in this regard?
Excellent question, because that's the evolution of the transformation of knowledge that we have been discussing, how we went from the classical trivium to the modern trivium. With Chomsky represents the modern trivium. So what he took the language studies, formalized it, and now expanded. He put the linguistic understanding of that traditional universal grammar that he traced all the way back to Panini, right? Yes. And as we said, Panini, the master guru of Pantajali, and all the way up to today. But Chomsky formalized it in a way that now and mathematized a lot of the linguistics as well, the grammar and the logic. Chomsky wrote an 800-page book on the syntactic structure of language, of grammar specifically. In other words, he found the logic in the grammar, and then he formalized it, and that opened up a whole new phase for applications. I found some of Chomsky syntax in studying Python language.
Okay.
Well, so it helped advance this. A lot of these advances we see in AI models a lot of them are using Chomsky syntax. Okay. Because he formalized that, so the universal grammar is all connected in there. So, but that's what I consider with Chomsky. What he did was he created the modern trivium. That's the way I see it. In other words, he created the modern foundation for the advancement of grammar. He formalized it and made it accessible to computational sciences. Okay, but it's still within the human domain. And then we go on to the computational trivium, which what they've done, they've taken Chomsky syntax and applied it to these computer languages, Python being one of them. And then, the more engineered C++ and others that are now
Right.
being used, these language models. Okay, so now we enter the computational trivium. Now, you asked about the transfiguration of what we call the computational trivium, which is electronic. So we're going now from electronics to photonics. And of course, that Abelio uses the term transfiguration, and because he's talking about the light world, right? He's talking about this quantum light, and but we're also using it biblically. It was the image of Christ when he went up to Mount Tabor, and he converted himself into pure light in front of his disciples. Yeah, and Moses appeared. I think it was Raphael's painting of the Transfiguration. In fact, the absolute structure emerges from there. Abelio also examined it mathematically, geometrically, and because the artists were great, also mathematicians. Raphael painted geometrically by the numbers, basically. And you can see the absolute structure, that absolute structure we talked about, right? The 6 directions of space, the sphere. And in that sphere, you see Christ emerging with Moses on one side and Elijah on the other, and Christ is completely transfigured. So he took a verse from the Bible and converted an art piece out of it, a master art piece called the Transfiguration. But the symbol is that how we transfigure ourselves. See, when we're talking about technology on one side, that's the objective side, right? The transitive side. And then we talk about the intransitive, the interior person transfiguring. And that's why I started the conversation talking about the Constitution, the Transcendental Constitution of the astral bodies, because those are light, that's the light world. The star body. And Tibetan yoga, we call it the diamond body, the Vajra. Okay, the diamond body. And again, we saw about the diamond lasers and how we crystallize these things, but most of us are so object-oriented, our vision are so outward thinking. We never think of it as if we are diamonds, as it we have a diamond body, in the sense that you have to go inward. And this is what the liberal arts do. They turn you inward, self-reflective. And that's what the esoteric sciences do. They bring you inward. They turn all the knowledge onto yourself. They make it self-reflective. And so you see, instead of looking just outward to the universe the way the scientists do, because they've been trained that way, they've been indoctrinated into thinking objectively. And so now we take the intransitive knowledge and we turn it inward, and we see it in ourselves. We see the universe in ourselves. See that? And so this is the analogy, the homology that we're talking about, the transfiguration of computational science with the photonics now coming in. We know that light is biblical, and we know that light is consciousness manifesting itself in the objective world, knowledge world that we're living today. And so that light is now also awakening us. It's a universal collective illumination of mankind. This is what Dr. Sardanon's prediction was, that we're entering in a collective illumination of Abelio says the transfiguration of the world in man, or in humanity, inside of us. And so so as we're seeing, and all these photonics emerge, this is not happening outside, it's coming to us. And I discovered then, of course, this is why the virtual retinal display became, to me, the most important technology of the age. Because this is where it all meets in the eye, in our eyes. The retina is where the information from the external world is converted into internal. It goes into the neural circuitry of the brain. And now we have the retinal laser display, a device that actually takes that information that we have and transmits it directly into the brain, into the visual cortex. And one of the interesting thing about the visual cortex is that it occupies 50% of the neocortex. You know,
Yes.
the brain has the upper region, the middle region, and the bottom, the brainstem, right? So you have the
Yes.
medulla, the cerebellum, and you have the cerebrum. And most of our higher reasoning faculties are in the neocortex.
Mhm.
The language use, the consciousness, the mathematics, all of that is happening in the visual cortex, in the neocortex. But the visual system occupies 50% of it. So and absorbs over 80% of all the information that comes from the external world. So it's a major pipeline to the human brain. That's why visual education is so important.
Mhm.
And now we're talking about computational, visual computation, and we're talking about visualization of knowledge and information. And so there's a huge revolution now in advanced computational visualization. That's so part of it. But the laser, the holograms are now taking us to the next paradigm, to the next
Right.
level of
Right.
visualization.
And I don't want to go into holograms yet because we can't
Yeah.
talk about this work without talking about Hauser's work and his thoughts on moral grammar. And it works the same as, let's say, Noam Chomsky's work with the cognitive capacity, acquiring language and how it shapes and applies our language. But would you comment a little bit more on Hauser's work?
Wonderful. I came across Hauser's work investigating Chomsky's grammar, right? And I found two sources. I found a visual grammar with Gunther that utilizes the Chomskyan model, the Chomskyan grammar model.
Mhm.
This is the most advanced grammar we have today. Transformative, genetic, very advanced. So what they did was these colleagues of Chomsky's, one went into the visual, he converted a visual grammar, okay, of the eye. The eye operates with its own grammar. And so, because it's intelligence, right? But Hauser, what he discovered was that there's a moral sense deep inside the brain. Chomsky had always talked about the moral sense. And also, we also talk about rhetoric, ethos, the ethos in the trivium,
Yeah.
right? Which
Yeah.
is the ultimate conclusion of the trivium, right? It's not just reasoning, it's pathos, it's love, it's feeling, it's empathy, sympathy, connection. And pathos is the heart and the connection, but the ethos is where the moral sense comes in.
Yes.
The moral development, the character, the virtues, the practice of the virtues. And again, that's why we chose the Masons, because they emphasize not just the liberal art, they also practice the virtues, the 7 virtues. And so Chomsky also went to he also talked about that with the development of our cognitive development, the use of grammar and logic and rhetoric develops our moral sense. Okay, so what Howard did was he found the actual neocortex. He actually found the physiological correspondence to this. Remember, a lot of these assertions about grammar and logic, this was all metaphysical. Okay,
Yes. Yes.
this was one of Chomsky's greater contribution, that he made it biological. See that? And
Yes.
yeah, so this is something that is inscribed in our bodies, in our genetics. That's why Chomsky calls about the genetics of language, right? Biolinguistics. So Hauser found the moral code in the brain. That's what he did, and he found the grammar, the Chomskyan grammar, to that. And that's what he developed. It was so beautiful. And then he talks about what we call the mirror neurons. That was another discovery in association with that biological discovery of the moral sense that we're developing with the trivium. And what happens to these mirror neurons? They found that they started with a child, and I got to observe that in my own child. You know, he sees his mom crying, and the baby starts crying, right? And why? You know, he's feeling what she's feeling, and he's experiencing what she's experiencing by simply seeing. And they found that this corresponds to these mirror neurons. They resonate with what they see. You know, they see the pain in another, and that's the source of what we call empathy. See, you feel the pain of another. How do you do that? Well, you know, there's something inside you that's resonating with the other person. And so the moral sense then starts to kick in with what they discovered was the mirror neurons. But Hauser goes, and what he does, and the other side, he takes grammar, he takes Chomsky grammar and develops it, and he shows you the parallel, right? Which in essence, it's just a continuation of the tradition.
Yes,
It's just confirming, verifying, and developing in a more scientific, formal language what we already know, which has been for 2,400 years. That the grammar, you know, that Aristotle formalized, and it's been the guiding light for education all throughout. And only now we're giving it a more scientific, formal sense to it.
Right. So before we go into holographics, I'm going to say 4 words.
Yes.
Functional magnetic resonance imaging.
Uh-huh.
Will you share with us a little bit about it to establish just a little bit of a foundation?
Oh, wow. That's very interesting. You know, there's a lot happening now with this functional resonance imaging now. Some people may be familiar with Dr. Daniel Amen. He's done like 80,000 brain scans. And now they have clinics all over. This observation I started doing like 20 years ago.
Okay.
Now this whole thing has just has expanded, and now Dr. Daniel Amen talked about doing resonance imaging, brain scans in living tissue, not dead tissue, the way they do rat or whatever, where they do it with the cadavers and all that. No, this is living tissue examination, so you see the brain in action, and it just lights up the different regions. So now this is a way much more advanced than when I even started writing about it, 20 years ago. I just saw it coming, and so now the Dr. Daniel Amen has clinics all over the nation. In New York, they have a clinic. You go in, I think for $5,000, $3,000 or $5,000. They do a complete brain scan. They'll examine all the regions of your brain and see where there are lesions, whether they have, because you may have had some kind of injury, brain injury, and it just got packed away somewhere there. But that injury was never resolved. So what happens now, it blocks the unfolding or the full development of the brain. It becomes a blockage. And so what they found with this functional resonance imaging and the scanning, and they found, or they're now identifying and now they can clear it. They have natural holistic formulas that will help you address them. Instead of letting it fester, living a lifetime with a brain injury, and then all of a sudden your brain is not optimal because blocking regions of it that are not, functional, right? That are not functioning. because of that blockage. So that's what's behind that idea. And so we're addressing brain health. In fact, that's what LaserEduLogics does. I mean, we want brain health, all right? And that includes, of course, nutrition, holistic, whole plant food, living food, versus dead food. There's been a major debate. And the China study is one of the best sources that has clarified this. Living food is a major source of brain health, right? Water, of course, clean water, oxygen, breathing, yoga, all these are all brain food. Right? To clear precisely all those blockages that have been, all the brain damages that we've accumulated. So we have two ways. One, the actual identification of it with this technology, and we have then the solution, the natural holistic solution to clear these, injuries that we've accumulated, right? Are you still there? I think you froze. Hello? Hello.
Okay, you're back.
Oh, I don't know what happened.
The last words that I heard was to clear these.
To clear?
To clear these, and then it went out.
The brain, the brain injuries, to clear, clean, and heal, right? These brain injuries. So we tackle it from all these different angles, right? Functional imaging being one of them, holistic plant foods, and yoga on the other.
Right. So we have to, I want to bring us forward to the holographic paradigm. But in order to get to the holographic paradigm, you absolutely must go through the evolution of how we get to fiber optics. The fact that we start off with electricity in a copper-based system, and now we're talking about infrastructure. We're talking about the infrastructure in the background that supports the whole holographic paradigm innovation that we're going to. And so I love this because this is my realm. This is where I love infrastructure and putting it together. So why don't you take us through the journey and the evolution of copper infrastructure versus fiber optics, and then fiber optics to free space optics.
Wow. Yeah. So that goes back to the Laser Information Age book, which was so exciting for me, discovering this new infrastructure that was emerging, or that is actually emerging, and that the new world, the new age that we're actually entering, and the age of light that was promised in the literature, the age of revelation, and all this wonderful stuff where I'm actually witnessing it. And so there's a study in geomagnetics where they it's called biogeometry was the course that I took with Dr. Gilbert, but it's really geomagnetics and biomagnetics. And so what we found is that electricity, it's one flow of electrons, right? And it's energy. When electrification really started in the 19th century, and it was a huge breakthrough, right? Electrification. when the city started. Einstein himself, by the way, discovered that his father was an engineer for an
Yes.
electrical company. And so he started playing with these gadgets. And that's how he started his love for electromagnetics, right? And so,
Oh, bring your camera down again.
okay.
Thank you.
Oh, I can't hardly see myself anyway. So yes, this is studying the light world, right? You have to study the history of electricity, right? And how you know the how all this electromagnetics happen. And you know, Einstein was a big part of this. I studied like 3 biographies of Einstein, and it was so beautiful how he interacted in real time with these devices that were, you know, when this was the beginning of electrification. But what we found in the esoteric side of these studies was that electricity is really the negative form of this energy. There's and then there is the positive side, which is magnetics. So you have electromagnetic, you have electricity on one side, you have magnetism on the other. Okay, and these great scientists in the 19th century, they started putting it together, you know, because before they only knew about the electricity and they only knew about magnetism. And so in 19th century is where they unified these two forces, and they saw that light was a result of both, not one, but both. But we capitalized on electricity because it illuminated, right? It started illuminating our cities. And now we didn't have to rely on lamps and, you know, and well oils and you know, and these limited sources of light. And that was all part of, again, that dark age, right?
Yes.
They didn't have that light. The beginning of the age of light starts with electrification. Of course, but we're still in a transition, but there was a negative side to that electricity that we found in the esoteric studies, and it's that it's destructive. It's also chaotic, and it produces pollution, right? What we call electromagnetic smog, right? And so we didn't see none of this, of course, and at the beginning, but as we advance in the quantum studies and you go deep, you start seeing how clean the laser light is. It's impure, right? And so as I discovered the electron flow through electricity in the esoteric studies, we found that it's a source of damage. You know, it's like the you know, like the you can get electrocuted. That's how powerful. Not only that it's powerful, it's chaotic. And that's what we call incoherent light, the incoherent source of light. And of course, there's also a biblical side to that, you know, about the angel Lucifer was the most beautiful angel, and it was the you know, God's first angel. You know, it was that's why they call him Lucifer, the light. And so, and then the legend or the symbols that the fall of these angels, okay, the fall. And what that meant, in fact, was that there was a descent into certain region, into the earth, this descent, right, this quality of light. At first, it was beautiful and perfect when he was connected to God, and when he disconnected, it became chaotic. It descended into this sphere, and we're, you know, a lot of this was all metaphysical, but now we're finding the physics of it, and so we find that this light, it's incoherent. In other words, it's dispersed. And where does the dispersion happen? Of course, and now with quantum advancement, now we're seeing how this beautiful light, this perfect light, the light of God, right, becomes distorted as it goes through certain regions of the earth. Okay. So, for example, in the atmosphere, we have the ionosphere. Okay. Above the ionosphere, and you have the lithosphere, you have different regions of the earth, right? At about
Right.
100 miles is the dividing line between the geomagnetic field and the inside of the atmosphere. It's called the ionosphere. Okay.
Yeah.
What happens to the light of the sun? Now, in the geomagnetic field, we have what they call a maser. The parallel in the geomagnetic field is laser light. They call it a
Yes.
maser, microwave amplified stimulated emission of radiation. They found this, Einstein, I illustrated in my book with the FAST satellite that NASA sent,
Yeah.
and they discovered that in the geomagnetic field, there's a maser, there's an invisible aurora. Okay, in the North Pole and the South Pole, we have these auroras, right? They're this beautiful display of colors that are coming. They're oxygen lasers. They're oxygen when they're in the side of the Earth. And then on the invisible, they found invisible auroras that produce the visible auroras, right? When there's a magnetic storm, or in other words, there's a huge sunspot, magnetic wave, magnetic winds coming from the sun. When it's high intensity, it just expands these auroras, and then they cool down. But what happens is the interaction of the magnetic field with the oxygen layer in the Earth produces this beautiful display of light, the auroras. That's the visible side. The invisible is amazing. In other words, it works at the microwave level.
Yes.
Infrared on that side of the region, it's not visible to us, but the scientists were able to identify it. So there's this beautiful change, transfiguration or transformation, transmutation of this coherent light, okay, in the atmosphere. This coherent light coming from the sun. Okay, the sun has lasers. And we receive it, and the earth has this magnetic laser, okay, invisible and then visible. Maser turns into laser. Okay, so but what happens in the ionosphere? The ionosphere disperses the sun's rays.
Yes.
And that's what we see as a blue sky. We see the blue sky, but what we're seeing actually is the dispersion of the light's rays, of the rays of the sun. The light now becomes incoherent. What was coherent in the geomagnetic sphere now becomes incoherent. In other words, it disperses. Okay. And so this explains how the pure light now becomes impure. You see, coherency becomes incoherency, purity becomes impurity. And then, what I saw was, wow, now we see how things get distorted on Earth. On Earth, we have killings, we have suicide, we have murder, we have all these crimes that are committed by humans, for humans, and other humans and other animals, and all this chaos that happens here. But underneath and beyond this, there's this order. And this is what we're called upon, to discover and to uncover and to serve that order, the higher order.
A higher order.
Yes. And so, but as long as we're under the disorder, we don't see it. We're blinded. And again, this comes to our eyes. This is another reason why we couldn't see. You see, beyond what was beyond within the physical spectrum. And even within the visible spectrum, what we see is chaotic. Or what we see is limited, blind. We're blinded by this incoherency. Okay, this incoherency that is what impedes our cognition. And again, when you see the light, the eyes, when they receive the photons of information coming from the external world, the brain has to do a lot to correct that. What does the visual cortex do? It inverts it.
Yes.
What we call population inversion in laser world. To reverse that, we do in lasers, that's what we do. We take incoherent light and we reverse it into coherent light. This is what lasers do. The laser media takes incoherent light, bombarded. That's how Mayman, the original inventor of the first laser, that's what he did. He took a high power lamp of incoherent light and lamp, and he bombarded a ruby laser, a ruby medium, a ruby crystal. And the rubies inside the axis points in the axis inside the ruby, what it did was it converted the incoherent photons into coherent photons. It aligned them to the axis. This is what we do in yoga. We aligned all the information coming from the world through the axis, central axis. When photons align themselves through a central axis, they become coherent.
Yeah.
You see
Yes.
that? That's what we do with the laser. But guess what's happening now? We're reconverting, and this is what we mean by the transfiguration, right? We're reconverting into that pure light. We're bringing back the incoherency back to its coherent state. And this is the new world that we're going into, a pure, cleaner restoration of our original cognitive purity. You see, another consequence of this incoherent light bombarding our eyes is that the brain has to do a lot to correct that. So it inverts the imaging first. That's how the brain creates coherency out of incoherency. The brain has to make sense of all that information and corrects it. So what does the brain do? Well, a lot of it is lost. A lot of it is called what we call information loss, the noise versus the signal. Right? So a lot of information is lost in that process of correction of incoherency. So the brain has to do a lot of work, and whatever it produces is incomplete. You know, so this is why we have an underdeveloped and an incomplete vision of what's happening all around us. We don't see far beyond. But now with this new technology, the retinal laser display, it alleviates the brain from a lot of that hard work of having to correct and work with insufficient information and incoherent light sources. Now you're working with coherent light source. All information now coming into the brain is coherent and corrected. And this is what we mean by cognitive correction.
And hence the MEMS system, correct?
Yes.
Where we use the mirrors, we use the wavelengths, we use the lasers, and we combine the HPU, which is the holographic processing unit, and we are able to then bring organized, displayed technology presented to the world.
That's right. That's exactly right. So now we're using an advanced transfigurational system. Again, we're converting back to light. It's almost like what the Christ did. He went up the mountain and he converted himself into pure light. And then, and so we're the whole unit, the whole earth is now being converted. In other words, transfigured, reconfigured. And we call it transfigured, because we're bringing in transcendental light, we're bringing quantum light, we're bringing pure light, we're bringing coherency, ordered light into the earthly affairs and our affairs directly, not just the scientific research, but our own living, a personal everyday living. And now we're going to be wearing, right? This is what we call the augmented reality gears.
Augmented reality, absolutely. We talked a little bit about it last time. Yes.
Yes. Where that pure light now is informing the brain, informing the visual cortex and the neocortex. And now we're going to immerse our studies, we're going to take all these knowledge, education, right, to that level, where we now can absorb a lot of this knowledge without all the hassle of clearing and the incoherency. Once we've cleared the road, now the light can flow.
Yes. And this is going to be a beautiful place to end it, but I have one last question for you, which is basically this. Okay, we have the holographic principle, we understand it, and we understand about the theoretical results. But you can't leave this topic without relating it to black holes and how that picture-esque of how they're comparing holographic principle to black holes?
Oh my God. There's so many aspects to that. It's just amazing. I mean, the Kabbalistic parallel, of course, we know,
Yes,
black hole. What's a black hole?
right. What is a black hole? Yes,
It's a gravitational field. Okay, this universal gravitational fields, and it absorbs, just brings it swallows up the light. And the reason it's black is because it's invisible. It's not, it goes beyond our visible spectrum, right? It may be translucent, in fact. It may be just translucent. But what we do in simplified Kundalini Yoga is that we actually go to that 0 point energy state,
right.
where you turn off the lights of the universe and you navigate into the absolute space. And you have to go through that black space because it's static. All that dynamics of the universe, all the light, you just turn them off. It's like switch off and you go to sleep. But only in here, you're not going to sleep, you're going into a higher consciousness. You see? So it is the portal, in fact, to that spiritual universe, to that spiritual dimension. That's basically what it is. It's gravity. Vedaditi calls gravity God. Okay. Newton called universal gravity, the universal force. Gravity, in fact, they call it the unified field. In both Vedaditi and Vedaditi Maharishi, which was the father of the simplified Kundalini Yoga system, where I got my initiation from, it's a Siddha Yoga tradition, and that's what we do. We go into different states of meditation till you reach what we call the delta level. You go from alpha to theta to delta. In delta, the brain waves, they level off. They level off and they go static and they disappear. You see? But you don't disappear. You see, your consciousness exists.
Always.
You see that?
Yes.
In that space, in that absolute space. You see? And that's the absolute rest. Your body is in samadhi. Your body is absolutely static. It's static. It's and your consciousness goes into that state, the absolute space. So in essence, that black hole is a portal to the spiritual universe. And so, but what the scientists discovered with the hologram is that the holographic universe, the theory of the holographic universe, is that on the surface of this black hole, you have the holographic principle. In other words, where light interacts, and at first they thought with Hawkins that the light never escapes once it goes in, but the light does. You can't see information. Now we're seeing information interacting and coming out. But what it is that is on the surface, you have this the light principle, because light comes from there. You see, that's one of the greatest mysteries. From the absolute comes the Holy Trinity, the 111. From zero, the 0 point energy state, comes the 111, and that's in the I Ching, mathematically. And that 111 is the static principle, but then if you take the one, you take that one and you separate the 1 on the right. That's the principle of separation, right? Where you start creating, right? The 11 in secret value or triangular value. This is a Pythagorean principle in the Quadrivium. If you add 11 times 2 divided by times 12 divided by 2, you're going to get 66. It's called the secret value, and the secret value is the triangular value. Pythagoras used to write numbers in the triangle. So for example, the triangular value of 10 the triangular value of 4 is 10. Why? Because 1 plus 2 plus 3
Three.
plus 4
Yes.
triangle is 10. So to
Right.
get to 10, you have to add up all those numbers that came before it. And so in the case of 11, which is a component of 111, if you separate 11, you get 66.
Yes.
And that's the secret value. The root value, the secret root of 66 is 11. So what do you have in 166? The manifestation of the absolute in Kabbalah. And then that generates the whole Kabbalistic tree, and the manifestation starts to happen. So you see in the hologram, if you go back, now all these numbers are also mirror numbers, of course. And then you see that this is where the holographic principle starts to happen. Because a hologram is basically a three-dimensional image created by three lasers, by lasers. Okay, that's why when you see in a hologram, now you see them. They're using it for many technologies, right? So it's 3D image that's created from a two-dimensional source. So now we're going into the third dimension of visualization, right? Versus reading a book, right? You're reading it in 2 dimensions. You're reading a line, or you're seeing a width and height.
Yes.
Right. So now with the hologram, you got depth. So now you got 3 dimensions. So all the information that you're interacting with is now in 3D. And that's the beauty of interacting with information in a hologram. And not only that you're interacting in 3 dimensions, but you're now utilizing pure light, quantum light, laser light, biblical light, as I would call it. The original biblical light of God, not the fallen, incoherent, disconnected source, of light. And so that's where the holographic principle is connected to the absolute, but on the surface, it's really the first manifestation of the creative of God, the manifestation of the light principle. You see.
So we're way past an hour. And I know I want to end this, but I have to ask this last question, which is,
Sure.
So the holographic principle then suggests that the universe could be like a gigantic hologram. Do you want to comment?
Yeah, that's what we have. And we have actually the mathematical esoteric theory of it with Abelio, which we're going to be publishing. How these numbers reflect each other. And the holographic principle in essence is that the part reproduces the whole. And that goes to the Kybalion, okay, the all in one and the all and the one in all. Right? So the whole is in each of the part, because God is everywhere, right? And he's whole. You cannot fragment that universal principle. So the question was how the part relates to the whole, and how the whole is included in the part. And the hologram does that beautifully. You cut any hologram anywhere and it will reproduce the whole. So it's holistic in that sense.
Excellent. Oh my God, this has been a wonderful, wonderful conversation. Thank you so, so much. Is there any last words you want to leave with our audience?
Well, there's always the invitation to follow up on these studies and follow up on these works, So these books will be available online shortly. So you can investigate them for yourself, but start creating that awareness. Okay.
Thank you so, so much. This has been unbelievable. I love these conversations. I look forward to our next conversation. And we're going to talk about the MIT courseware, and we're going to talk a little bit more about the Knowledge Society. So stay tuned, and Thank you, thank you, Carlos, Concepcion, for your wisdom, for your expertise, for all that you bring and all that you share. Thank you for being on our show and sharing your heart. So appreciated and so much gratitude.
Hey, thank you, Analia. You've been such an agent of light and wisdom as well, you know, with your questions, with your open mind has been an inspiration to me actually. And I want to thank the audience too to participate and stay tuned. Yeah, so thank you wholeheartedly.
Thank you, Carlos. And this has been another episode of The Infinite Way. If you liked what you saw, please subscribe, please like us, please share, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.